Think you know old Hollywood? Think again. Behind the glamour of the golden age were stars who lived secret lives. Born male, but embraced identities that defied every norm. These performers risked everything, creating roles so flawless, even insiders were fooled for decades. Number 4 will leave you speechless. Get ready, because what you're about to hear might just rewrite Hollywood history. Before the term gender performance ever existed, Bert Seavoy was already living it, loudly, proudly, and with a wink. Born Everett Mackenzie, he created a larger-than-life stage persona, a flamboyant, no-holds-barred woman bursting with bright red hair, exaggerated makeup, and outlandish humor. But Seavoy never asked audiences to believe the illusion. He invited them into it, turning the joke into something shared and subversive. His catchphrase, "You don't know the half of it, dearie," became a cultural catchfire in the 1920s, echoing coast to coast with camp, charisma, and rebellion. But what truly cements Seavoy in queer entertainment history is his unexpected influence on one of Hollywood's most iconic sex symbols, Mae West. Her bold style, her swagger, even her sultry one-liners, many believe they were borrowed from Seavoy himself. Think about it. A woman mimicking a man who was mimicking a woman. The gender layers are dizzying, the originality unquestionable. Through that lens, Seavoy was not just ahead of his time. He was shaping the future of fame without ever getting the credit. Then came the final act, so theatrical, it felt scripted. In 1923, while strolling Long Beach during a storm, Seavoy saw lightning crack across the sky. With trademark flair, he pointed and quipped, "That'll be me, darling." Moments later, a bolt struck, and just like that, the curtain fell. It was gone. And with the rise of Hollywood's moral codes and sanitized images, so too went the memory of performers like him. Too daring, too queer, too real for the sanitized silver screen. But Bert Seavoy's flame, wild and electric, still glows between the lines of history, refusing to be erased. Long before RuPaul's Drag Race became a cultural force, Julian Eltinge was already dazzling America, not from the runway, but from the grandest stages of Broadway and vaudeville. Born William Julian Dalton in 1881, Eltinge revolutionized entertainment with a talent so rare it seemed almost magical. The power to transform himself into beautiful, convincing women on stage. But this was no underground act. In the 1910s, Eltinge was a full-blown star. So massive, he had an actual theater on 42nd Street named after him. The Julian Eltinge Theater was not just a venue, it was a monument to his nationwide appeal, proof that your grandparents, or their parents, likely admired him. What made Eltinge truly remarkable was not just the wardrobe or the wigs, it was his total commitment to illusion. While many performers of the time leaned into camp and caricature, Eltinge studied women's gestures, expressions, even their slightest movements, and replicated them with breathtaking accuracy. Audiences were routinely stunned when, at the end of his act, he removed his wig and revealed his true identity. The tension between his stage persona and real life only added to the mystique. Offstage, Eltinge worked hard to present an ultra-masculine image, boxing, smoking cigars, doing whatever it took to shut down whispers about his sexuality. It was a fascinating and often heartbreaking balancing act in an era where being different came with consequences. Eltinge's fame extended far beyond live performance. He starred in silent films like The Countess Charming and The Isle of Love, even sharing the screen with a young Rudolph Valentino. At his peak, he was making $3,500 a week, the modern equivalent of around $60,000. Making him one of the highest-paid entertainers in the industry. But fame is a fragile thing. As America moved into the conservative 1930s, the same culture that once celebrated him began to turn. Female impersonation was now seen through a lens of suspicion and legality. By the 1940s, Eltinge was no longer allowed to appear in women's clothing in public. Not even on stage. In the final chapter of his career, he was reduced to standing beside racks of costumes he could no longer wear, pointing at dresses instead of performing in them. When he passed away in 1941, much of the world had already forgotten him. His story is a haunting reminder of how fame fades and how shifting cultural winds can erase even the brightest lights from history's stage. Was not just controversial, he was explosive. Long before most dared to blur the lines of gender and sexuality on stage, Bourbon kicked the door wide open. Born Hal Wadsworth, though even that is debated, he became one of the most daring performers of the pre-code era. While the industry grew more fearful and restrictive, Bourbon danced on the edge of what was considered acceptable, embracing ambiguity in both performance and personal life. In a time when female impersonation was being closely monitored by law enforcement, that ambiguity made him a target. Authorities labeled him morally dangerous, but Bourbon did not back down. What set him apart was pure audacity. His comedy albums, like hilarious songs for Gaylades, were bold, cheeky, and outrageously ahead of their time. The material was so suggestive that many record stores outright refused to carry his work. So he sold them himself, directly at his live shows, leaning into his underground status like a badge of honor. As the culture turned more conservative in the 1930s and 1940s, mainstream doors began to close. But Bourbon kept performing. In smoky gay nightclubs and hidden venues, places where his raw, rebellious spirit still had a home. The final chapter of Bourbon's life reads like a Hollywood tragedy. In 1968, at age 76, he was arrested for murder and died in prison in 1971, while serving his story ending not on a stage but behind bars. What makes Ray Bourbon's legacy so haunting is not just the tragedy, it is the silence that followed. Despite influencing generations of performers, he has been all but erased from Hollywood and entertainment history. You will not find him in most textbooks. You will not hear his name on award stages. And yet his absence says more than any spotlight could. It is a chilling reminder of how quickly bold voices can be buried and how selective cultural memory really is. When Barbette stepped onto the stage in the 1920s and 1930s, audiences were not just watching a performer in drag. They were witnessing a boundary-breaking artist who defied gravity and gender all at once. Born Vanderlei Broadway in Texas, Barbette stunned crowds with death-defying aerial acrobatics and elegant trapeze work, wrapped in the illusion of a glamorous woman. But the magic was not just in the stunts, it was in the transformation. Mid-performance, Barbette would remove his wig, revealing his masculine identity, turning the entire act into something deeper, a living, breathing commentary on gender as performance. This wasn't just entertainment, it was art. Europe's intellectual and artistic elite were mesmerized. Barbette's influence rippled through the surrealist movement and avant-garde circles of interwar Europe, inspiring creators to rethink what gender and performance could mean. While many female impersonators were limited to smoky vaudeville stages and backroom nightclubs, Barbette soared above it all, literally and figuratively, gracing world-renowned venues like the Casino de Paris and the London Palladium. With each performance, he challenged the audience. What truly defines male or female? Where does illusion end and identity begin? When Barbette passed in 1973, the New York Times paid tribute with an obituary, an honor rarely given to performers like him. And yet, despite that recognition, his legacy has faded in modern memory. His daring artistry, which once inspired the great minds of a generation, is too often overlooked today. But make no mistake, Barbette was not just a performer. He was a pioneer, an illusionist of identity, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful statements are made in mid-air, between the tightrope and the truth. Known professionally as the Creole fashion plate, was more than a vaudeville performer. He was a master of transformation who challenged not only gender norms but also the boundaries of race and identity. Born George Paduti in Baltimore around 1897, Norman stepped onto the stage with an act that was unlike anything his audiences had seen. While others relied on illusion, he delivered something far more complex. A layered, provocative performance that blurred lines society desperately wanted to keep separate. What set Norman apart was his voice, literally. While most female impersonators of the time lip-synced or relied on falsetto, Norman could sing in both male and female registers, often switching between them mid-song with seamless precision. That talent earned him the nickname the Creole Fashion Plate for his extravagant wardrobe changes, and Creole for the Southern racially ambiguous persona he embodied on stage. His costume changes were legendary, up to 6 complete transformations in a single performance, each unveiling a new female character with her own look, mannerisms, and vocal style. It was not just drag, it was high art, executed with dazzling technical skill. But Norman's story is also tangled in the complicated racial dynamics of early 20th century entertainment. Though white, his stage persona played with what white audiences of the time considered exotic, flirting with Creole identity in a way that modern eyes might view as problematic. Still, the impact was undeniable. At his peak, Norman was a headliner, commanding top billing and captivating crowds nationwide. And yet today, he is almost entirely forgotten. His name, once lit up in theaters, is now barely a whisper in entertainment history. Karyl Norman's disappearance from the cultural spotlight speaks volumes about who gets remembered and who gets erased when history is written by the mainstream. Perhaps the most tragically short-lived career on our list belongs to Jean Malin, a trailblazing performer whose star burned bright and fast, shaking the foundations of entertainment in ways that still feel radical today. Born Jean Malin in Brooklyn in 1908, he was one of the very first openly gay performers in American show business. But what made him stand out even more was his refusal to play by any one rule. Unlike others who performed strictly in drag, Malin moved fluidly between male attire and female presentation, crafting a stage presence that was boldly gender fluid, long before the term even existed. By the late 1920s, Malin had become a fixture at Prohibition-era speakeasies and New York clubs, especially those that catered to the city's underground gay and lesbian scene. His popularity soared despite the era's rampant homophobia. In 1930, at the very height of his fame, he was hired by a top Los Angeles nightclub, the Palace, for a staggering $250 per week, the equivalent of over $4,000 today. This made him one of the first openly gay entertainers to break into mainstream venues. Hollywood soon took notice. Malin landed roles in films like Arizona to Broadway, 1933, bringing his gender-bending charisma to the big screen. Yet behind the scenes, studio executives remained wary. His identity made him a risk, and the roles he was offered never matched the scale of his talent. Then, just as quickly as he had risen, everything ended. In August 1933, after a performance at the Ship Cafe in Venice, California, Malin got into his car. Moments later, the vehicle inexplicably shifted into reverse and slammed into a pier. He was killed instantly. He was just 25 years old. Though officials ruled it an accident, whispers of foul play lingered, a reflection of the era's deep-rooted fear and hostility toward queer performers. No conclusive evidence ever surfaced. But what remains is a legacy far bigger than his short time on Earth. Jean Malin dared to live and perform openly, authentically, and for that, he became a silent icon of courage and cultural change, lost too soon. In the smoky speakeasies and jazz clubs of 1920s Harlem, few performers could light up a room quite like Gladys Bentley. But unlike the other names on this list, Bentley's story defied convention in the opposite direction. She was born female, but built her legendary career performing in men's attire, boldly confronting gender norms from a place few dared to tread. Rising to fame during the Harlem Renaissance, she took the stage at iconic venues like the Clam House and the Ubangi Club, instantly commanding attention not just with her voice, but with her presence. Bentley would strut onto the stage in a crisp white tuxedo and top hat, sitting at the piano and belting out blues songs laced with lyrics so daring they shocked even the open-minded crowds of 1920s Harlem. At over 6 feet tall and around 250 pounds, she was an imposing figure, tailored to perfection, sometimes even sporting a thin mustache to complete her masculine presentation. But her style was more than fashion, it was declaration. She did not just wear men's clothing, she embodied male swagger with unapologetic confidence. And she did so while openly embracing her lesbian identity, a rarity even in Harlem's progressive nightlife scene. Reports say she married a white woman in a civil ceremony in Atlantic City, though no official record was ever found. Still, the act itself was revolutionary, a defiant gesture in a time when both same-sex and interracial unions were considered taboo. Yet Bentley's boldness came with a heavy cost. As America entered the repressive McCarthy era, she became a target like many gender non-conforming figures. In 1952, she appeared in Ebony magazine under the headline, "I Am a Woman Again," claiming to have undergone hormone treatments, married a man, and found solace in Christianity. Whether this was her truth or a survival tactic in a hostile world remains a point of debate. Gladys Bentley died in 1960 at just 52 years old. Despite her fearless artistry and identity, her name faded from the spotlight. But her story stands as a powerful counterpoint to the male-born performers on this list, proving that gender nonconformity in early 20th century entertainment was never a one-way street. It was a revolution with many voices, and hers was one of the boldest. Here's the entry you've been waiting for. The most remarkable story of gender identity and performance in entertainment history. Billy Tipton was a respected jazz musician who played piano and saxophone in bands across the United States from the 1930s through the 1970s. He married several times, adopted 3 sons, and lived what appeared to be a modest, unassuming life as a moderately successful musician. But in 1989, at the age of 74, the world learned a secret no one had suspected. Billy had been assigned female at birth and had lived his entire adult life as a man, without his wives, children, or even fellow musicians knowing his birth sex. His story remains one of the most complete and successful gender crossings in American entertainment history. Born Dorothy Lucille Tipton in Oklahoma in 1914, Billy began binding his chest and presenting as male during the 1930s. While this may have initially been motivated by the greater professional opportunities available to men in the music world, it soon became clear that this was not just a career move. It was personal. Tipton's musical journey spanned the swing-era dance bands of the 1930s and 1940s, eventually leading to the formation of the Billy Tipton Trio. But what truly makes his story extraordinary is the extent to which he lived privately as a man. He had long-term relationships with women, including several marriages, and none of his partners ever suspected his assigned sex at birth. To maintain this privacy, Tipton crafted a careful and consistent narrative. He told partners he had suffered a chest injury that required constant binding and full coverage. His story forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about gender identity and performance. While other figures on this list performed alternate gender roles on stage but returned to their assigned identities offstage, Tipton's transformation was not a costume. It was a lifelong truth. Though he may not fit the typical definition of a male-born performer presenting as female, his journey in many ways runs deeper. Billy Tipton deserves to be recognized not just as an anomaly, but as a pioneer who challenged every notion of gender, identity, and the boundaries we assume cannot be crossed. As Hollywood entered the conservative 1950s, female impersonation had largely vanished from mainstream entertainment, until T.C. Jones brought it roaring back with elegance, wit, and theatrical precision. Born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Jones crafted a performance style that elevated drag beyond its vaudevillian roots and into the realm of legitimate stage art. Rather than relying on generic female personas, Jones specialized in celebrity impressions, bringing icons like Tallulah Bankhead, Bette Davis, and Katharine Hepburn to life, not as over-the-top caricatures, but as richly layered character studies. He mimicked not just their voices and appearances, but their mannerisms, their rhythms, their very essence. Jones accomplished the unthinkable, mainstream success in an era defined by rigid gender roles and cultural conservatism. His one-man show Mask and Gown debuted in Los Angeles in 1957 and proved so popular it made its way to Broadway the following year. Critics were stunned, not by the novelty of his act, but by the depth of his performance. Some even compared him to the era's top character actors. Unlike his predecessors who were confined to nightclubs and backroom stages, Jones appeared on national television, including major programs like The Ed Sullivan Show and What's My Line. He even crossed into film, landing a role in the 1968 musical Funny Girl alongside Barbra Streisand. Though the part was small, it marked a breakthrough. A female impersonator appearing in a major Hollywood production at a time when most were shut out. What makes T.C. Jones's legacy so powerful is not just what he achieved, but when. The 1950s were a time of cultural conformity when stepping outside traditional gender norms often came at a steep cost. Yet Jones managed to walk that tightrope with grace and strategy, proving that female impersonation could be more than spectacle. It could be art. By focusing on theatrical craft and the psychology of his characters, he helped build a bridge between the vaudeville past and the modern era of drag. His influence echoes through the work of performers like Craig Russell, Charles Pierce, and countless contemporary drag artists who now follow the path he paved, one heel click at a time. As television took over American entertainment in the 1960s and 1970s, Jim Bailey emerged as perhaps the most successful female impersonator of the broadcast era. But what Bailey brought to the stage was far more than imitation. It was transformation. His performances were so precise, so emotionally tuned, that they often fooled even seasoned industry insiders. His most iconic impersonation? Judy Garland. Bailey's portrayal was so uncanny that even Garland's daughter, Liza Minnelli, gave her blessing, and later, her friendship. This was not just mimicry. Bailey could channel Garland's voice, mannerisms, and inner vulnerability with such precision that even in audio-only recordings, experts sometimes could not tell them apart. What set Bailey apart was more than technical skill. It was emotional depth. His portrayal of Judy Garland captured not only her voice and expressions, but her pain, her brilliance, and the raw humanity that made her a legend. The same held true for his portrayals of other stars like Barbra Streisand and Peggy Lee. These were not drag performances played for laughs. They were tributes crafted with reverence and intensity. And America noticed. Bailey broke through to mainstream television like no female impersonator before him. He appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and The Carol Burnett Show. Not in the shadows, not on the fringes, but in prime time, beamed into millions of living rooms. Bailey's extraordinary reach during a time still deeply resistant to gender nonconformity came down to one thing: framing. He presented his art not as drag, but as acting, character work, transformations rooted in craft and precision rather than gender defiance. And in doing so, he made the unfamiliar feel familiar, giving Middle America a reason to applaud rather than recoil. Jim Bailey did not just perform as women. He honored them, embodied them, and helped shift the perception of what gender performance could be. Quietly, brilliantly, he moved the needle on acceptance, and did it with a standing ovation. Crossing the Atlantic, we meet perhaps the most commercially successful female impersonator of the 20th century, Danny LaRue. Born Daniel Patrick Carroll in Ireland, he rose to fame in Britain by creating a dazzling high-glamour style of female impersonation that earned him household recognition and a level of mainstream success few American peers ever reached. LaRue's performances were legendary for their spectacle, costumes that rivaled Broadway productions, often crafted by elite fashion designers and dripping in beads, feathers, and crystal embellishments, so heavy they demanded serious physical strength to wear. But Danny did not just perform on stages, he owned them. Literally. His own West End nightclub, simply called Danny's, became a celebrity hotspot, frequented by everyone from film stars to royalty, with Princess Margaret herself reportedly among his biggest fans. Unlike many female impersonators relegated to fringe venues, LaRue brought drag into Britain's living rooms. He was a fixture on mainstream television, hosting his own variety specials, especially his beloved Christmas shows, which became cherished family traditions across the country. What made this possible? It was Danny's savvy positioning. He called himself a comic in a frock, not a gender illusionist, delivering performances rooted in theatrical comedy, not personal identity. He always appeared in interviews as himself, never in character, carefully maintaining the boundary between stage and private life. This intentional separation helped the public see his work as entertainment, not self-expression, a critical distinction for the time. Danny LaRue's legacy is more than sequins and punchlines. He broke down the walls between drag and mainstream entertainment, proving that with enough sparkle, wit, and discipline, gender-crossing performance could thrive in the commercial spotlight. His formula, clean humor, show-stopping production, and smart self-branding, became a blueprint for generations to follow, and a reminder that sometimes it takes a man in a dress to change the game. So, what did you think of today's revelations? Were you surprised by any of these extraordinary stories? Leave a comment below and let us know which performers you're most fascinated by, or suggest another hidden piece of Hollywood history you'd like us to explore. Your participation helps us continue to shine a light on the stories that history has tried to forget. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most fascinating parts of history are often the ones left out of the official record books. If you found this exploration informative, be sure to subscribe to the LGBTQ+ Vibes channel and turn on notifications to stay tuned for our next installment of Hollywood's Forgotten History. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.